They laughed when humans said, "We will hunt you forever." 50 years later, the galaxy learned that humans don't make empty threats, they make promises that echo across generations. The Galactic Council chamber aboard Orbital Station Kepler-7 was a marvel of interstellar diplomacy, where representatives from over 300 species gathered to maintain peace across the galaxy. Today, however, the chamber buzzed with tension and barely concealed mockery as Ambassador Elena Vasquez of Earth stood at the central podium, her small human frame dwarfed by the towering alien forms surrounding her. Counselor Thraktar of the Hegemony, a massive reptilian being with scales that shimmered like oil, let out a sound that could only be described as laughter, though it emerged as a bone-rattling hiss. "The humans speak of consequences," he rumbled, his voice carrying across the chamber through the universal translators. "These soft-skinned primates who have barely learned to leave their single world dare to threaten the hegemony?" Ambassador Vasquez maintained her composure despite the jeers and chittering sounds of amusement from the assembled delegates. Her voice was steady when she spoke, carrying a weight that few in the chamber understood. "Honored counselors, I am not here to threaten. I am here to warn you. The attack on Colony Kepler 438b was unprovoked. 47,000 human civilians, including children, were vaporized in what you call a resource acquisition. But I tell you this now, and I ask that it be entered into the official record. If you do not cease these attacks and provide reparations, humans will hunt you forever." The chamber erupted in what could only be described as cosmic laughter. High Arbiter Zelnoth, an ancient being whose crystalline form had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, chimed with frequencies that translated as amusement. "Forever is a very long time, little human. Your species has existed for what, a few 100,000 years? The hegemony has ruled systems when your world was still cooling from stellar dust." Ambassador Vasquez nodded slowly. "Yes, Arbiter. And in that short time, we've learned something that your ancient wisdom seems to have forgotten. There is no distance we will not travel, no time we will not wait, no force in this galaxy that will stop us from finding those who harm our innocent." She paused, looking directly at Thraktar. "We don't just hold grudges, Counselor. We inherit them." 3 standard galactic months passed after the warning was delivered. The hegemony's response came not in words but in plasma fire and antimatter bombs. They struck 3 more human colonies: New Terra, Haven's Rest, and the agricultural world of Demeter's Garden. The message was clear. The hegemony would not be intimidated by what they saw as primitive threats from an upstart species. In the council chamber, Thraktar addressed his fellow members with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "The human worlds burn beautifully," he said, displaying holographic images of the devastated colonies. "Their so-called forever hunt seems to have ended before it began. Perhaps now the other younger species will understand the natural order. The strong take what they need. The weak serve or perish." The assembled delegates nodded in agreement, many having grown wealthy from the resources stripped from conquered worlds. The Naldari representatives, insectoid beings whose hive minds had dominated trade routes for millennia, clicked their approval. The energy-based entities known as the Void-Touched pulsed with satisfaction. Even the normally neutral Silicon Confederacy showed signs of agreement. High Arbiter Zelnoth, however, remained silent. Something about the human ambassador's words had stayed with them, an echo of conviction that felt different, but they said nothing, allowing the council to bask in their perceived victory over the humans. What none of them knew was that hidden throughout the galaxy, human ships had already begun moving. Not the obvious vessels of Earth's small navy, but civilian craft, cargo haulers, research ships, even family transports, all quietly changing course, all carrying volunteers who had heard the news of the latest attacks. They moved without fanfare, without official orders, guided only by a simple human principle: nobody hurts our people and walks away. 2 years after the Council's dismissal of humanity's warning, Thraktar was enjoying the spoils of his latest conquest on the pleasure world of Zephyria Prime. The hegemony had grown bolder, claiming 17 more systems and stripping 12 worlds of their resources. Human space had grown quiet, leading many to believe the species had finally learned their place in the galactic hierarchy. That's when Captain Sarah Chen arrived. Her ship, the Persistent Memory, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyria system with no fanfare. No grand fleet behind her, just a single unremarkable cargo vessel that had been modified with one purpose in mind. She had been a merchant before the attacks, running supplies to the outer colonies. Now she had a different cargo to deliver. Thraktar never saw her coming. The assassination was precise, surgical, and left no doubt about its origin. The hegemony leader was found in his private chambers, with a simple message carved into the wall in perfect hegemony. Script: Kepler 438b. Remembers. No trace of the assassin remained except for security footage of a human woman calmly walking through the facility's corridors, somehow bypassing every security system as if they didn't exist. The hegemony's response was swift and brutal. They located Captain Chen's family on Earth and prepared to strike, believing that threatening her loved ones would end this embarrassing incident. They found empty homes. The entire extended Chen family, parents, siblings, cousins, even distant relatives had vanished into the void, protected by networks that seemed to appear from nowhere. Within a month, 3 more high-ranking hegemony officials were dead. Each assassination was different. Poison on Xerion 7, an airlock malfunction on the fortress world of Grimhold, a reactor overload on the flagship Eternal Dominion. Each carried the same message, the names of different human colonies. The hunters had names, faces, histories, and they were everywhere. 5 years had passed since Ambassador Vasquez's warning, and the galaxy had begun to understand that humanity's definition of forever was not metaphorical. The first species to truly comprehend this were the Naldari, whose hive mind allowed them to process the growing pattern of human retaliation with mathematical precision. Queen Mind Vexhala, speaking for billions of her species, addressed the emergency council session with uncharacteristic nervousness. "The statistical analysis is disturbing," she said, her mandibles clicking anxiously. "Human operatives have eliminated 847 individuals directly responsible for attacks on their colonies. But the pattern shows they're not stopping there. They're targeting financial backers, equipment suppliers, even the mining companies that benefited from their stripped resources." High Arbiter Zelnoth's crystalline form had lost some of its luminescence over the years, dimmed by growing unease. "Elaborate, Queen Mind. What exactly are you suggesting?" The holographic display showed a galaxy-wide network of connections, trade routes, resource flows, financial transactions, all slowly being severed or disrupted. "They're not just hunting the perpetrators," Vexhala explained. "They're dismantling the entire economic ecosystem that made the attacks profitable. 3 major trade conglomerates have collapsed. The Xerion Mining Guild has lost 63% of its executive staff to accidents. They're not waging war, they're performing surgery." What terrified the council most was the patience being displayed. Humans weren't striking in rage or fury. They were executing a plan decades in the making. Intelligence reports spoke of human children growing up learning the names of those responsible for the colony attacks, of entire families dedicating their lives to tracking down individuals who thought themselves safely hidden in the depths of space. The most chilling report came from the Andorian Intelligence Service. "We've identified what appears to be a human generational mission. A family whose great-grandmother died on Haven's Rest has spent 4 generations tracking a single hegemony bureaucrat who authorized the resource survey that led to the attack. They found him last week, retired on a pleasure world surrounded by grandchildren. He died peacefully in his sleep, but he knew they were coming. They made sure of that." By the 10th year after the warning, the once mighty hegemony was crumbling from within. What had started as targeted assassinations had evolved into something far more sophisticated and terrifying. Humans had infiltrated every level of hegemony society, not as obvious spies or saboteurs, but as integral parts of their civilization. The human woman who served as Thraktar's replacement's personal chef had been preparing his meals for 3 years, earning his complete trust. The human engineer who maintained the life support systems on Hegemony Station Alpha had worked there for 7 years, becoming indispensable to operations. The human teacher who educated the children of high-ranking officials had shaped an entire generation of young hegemony minds. None of them had acted yet, but everyone knew they were there, waiting for the right moment, the right target. General Vorthak, now the supreme leader of what remained of the hegemony, called an emergency meeting with his inner circle. The room was sweeping for surveillance devices 3 times daily, Guards were rotated every 6 hours and no humans were allowed within 100 kilometers of their location. Still, they spoke in whispers, as if the very walls might be listening. "They're inside everything," whispered Admiral Keshatar, her usually imposing presence reduced to nervous paranoia. My own security detail had a human translator who'd been working with us for 5 years. We only discovered it when he submitted his resignation, along with copies of every classified document that had passed through that office. He just left, said his work there was complete. The general's claws scraped against the table as he struggled to maintain composure. How do we fight an enemy that doesn't fight? They're not declaring war. They're not massing fleets. They're just always there, watching, waiting, and every year, more of our leadership disappears. More of our infrastructure fails. More of our allies abandon us. What none of them realized was that their desperate meeting was being broadcast live to Earth's diplomatic corps, the human maintenance worker who had installed their bug-proof communication system had indeed made it impossible for traditional surveillance, but he had built the surveillance directly into the hardware itself. Humanity wasn't just hunting the hegemony's present. They were documenting their fear for future generations to study. 15 years after Ambassador Vasquez had stood before the Galactic Council, a new human representative requested an audience. Ambassador James Morrison was younger than his predecessor, but carried the same quiet intensity that had once seemed so unremarkable to the assembled species. The chamber was notably emptier than before. Several species had withdrawn from galactic politics entirely after discovering human observers embedded deep within their societies. High Arbiter Zelnoth, now visibly aged despite their crystalline nature, spoke first. "Ambassador Morrison, humanity's activities across the galaxy have created significant concern. Many of our member species feel that your people's interpretation of justice has become excessive." Morrison nodded respectfully. "Honored Arbiter, I understand the concern. However, I should clarify something important. The activities you're referring to aren't being directed by Earth's government. We warned you that humans would hunt you forever. We didn't promise we could control how that hunt would unfold." The chamber erupted in alarmed chittering and hissing. The implication was clear. If Earth's government wasn't directing these operations, then there was no central authority to negotiate with, no way to call off the hunt. Queen Mind Vex Hala, her hive mind species now down to just 3 remaining queen minds after mysterious system failures had claimed the others, spoke with visible distress. "Are you saying your government has no control over its own people?" Morrison's smile was gentle but chilling. "I'm saying that humans don't need government approval to remember our dead. Every human child learns the names of the colonies that were destroyed, the families that were lost. It's part of our basic education now. We have 47,000 names carved into a monument on Earth. Not soldiers, not politicians, but farmers and teachers and children who died because they happened to be human, in the wrong place at the wrong time." He gestured to the holographic display showing current galactic conditions. "The hegemony has effectively ceased to exist as a coherent government. The Zarian Mining Guild filed for bankruptcy protection last month. 17 species have reported that their resource extraction operations are no longer profitable due to mysterious equipment failures and personnel shortages. And every human in the galaxy, all 12 billion of us now spread across 300 worlds, remembers who laughed in this chamber when we asked for justice." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, High Arbiter Zelnoth spoke in frequencies barely above a whisper. What do you want from us, Ambassador?" Morrison's expression never changed. The same thing Ambassador Vasquez asked for 20 years ago. Justice for the innocent who died, reparations for the families who lost everything, and a promise that no species will ever again think they can casually murder humans without consequences. 25 years had passed since the warning, and the galaxy had learned to live with a new reality. Humanity had redefined what justice meant on a cosmic scale. The hunt hadn't ended with the collapse of the hegemony or the bankruptcy of the mining guilds. It had evolved into something far more comprehensive and terrifying. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the former ambassador's daughter who had grown up learning the names of every victim from Kepler 438b, now ran the Human Memory Project from a space station in neutral territory. The facility appeared to be a simple research outpost, but it served as the unofficial coordination center for what Historians would later call the Forever Hunt. The hegemony's former Admiral Kreshnil died yesterday, she reported during her weekly broadcast to human settlements across the galaxy. Natural causes. Old age on the retirement world of Sanctuary 7. He was 87 standard years old and had been living peacefully for the past decade. She paused, letting that information sink in. His memorial service will be attended by his great-grandchildren, none of whom were born when Kepler 438b was destroyed. The message was clear to anyone listening. Time didn't matter to the Forever Hunt. Distance didn't matter. Death from old age didn't absolve someone of responsibility. It just meant the accounting had been noted for the historical record. The most unsettling aspect of the hunt was how it had integrated into normal galactic life. Humans now lived and worked throughout known space, welcomed for their technical skills, their trade goods, and their cultural contributions. They built schools, hospitals, and parks. They fell in love with aliens, started businesses, and raised families. They had become part of the fabric of galactic civilization. But every human settlement included a memorial wall. Every human school taught the history of the colony attacks. Every human family tree included notations about which ancestors had been involved in the hunt and which targets they had been responsible for tracking. The hunt had become hereditary, passed down like an ancient tradition that would never be forgotten. The former High Arbiter Zel Noth, now retired and living on their home world, received a visitor one day, a young human woman who introduced herself as a cultural anthropologist studying crystalline species. She was polite, knowledgeable, and fascinated by their history. They spent months together, sharing stories and insights about the evolution of galactic politics. It was only when she was leaving that she mentioned, almost casually, that her great-grandfather had been a farmer on Colony Kepler 438b. She thanked Zelnoth for their time, said she hoped they would enjoy a peaceful retirement, and disappeared into the vast network of humans that now spanned the galaxy. Zelnoth never saw her again, but they understood the message. The hunt wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about remembrance. Every person who had played a role in the colony attacks, no matter how small, would be found, would be known, would be remembered. Not necessarily harmed, but never allowed to forget that their actions had consequences that echoed across generations. 50 years after Ambassador Vasquez's warning, the galaxy had settled into a new equilibrium. Humanity had become one of the major powers not through conquest or intimidation, but through the simple understanding that they never, ever forgot an injustice. The Forever Hunt had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, a distributed, multi-generational commitment to justice that operated outside any formal government structure. The current Galactic Council, now located on the human-built station Memory's Edge, featured Ambassador Sarah Chen Okafor, great-granddaughter of the merchant who had assassinated the original hegemony leader. She stood at the same podium where her ancestors had once been mocked, but the chamber's atmosphere had changed completely. Today marks 50 years since the Kepler 438b Memorial Day. She announced to the assembled representatives, "I'm pleased to report that the Humanity Remembers Foundation has completed its final accounting of all individuals and organizations involved in the colony attacks. The last entry was added this morning. Trader Valenth of the Outer Rim Shipping Collective, who provided logistical support for the Haven's Rest attack, died peacefully yesterday at the age of 127, surrounded by family. The chamber was silent, not with mockery or dismissal, but with respect for a process that had reshaped galactic civilization. The Forever Hunt had never been about extermination or conquest. It had been about ensuring that the cost of harming innocence was always, eventually, paid in full. The Foundation's archives now contain complete life histories of 47,832 individuals directly or indirectly involved in the attacks. Ambassador Chen Okafor continued. These records will be maintained in perpetuity, not as a threat, but as a reminder of what happens when the galaxy forgets that every innocent life has value. Queen Mind Zalthara, the current representative of the much-diminished Naldari Collective, spoke with carefully modulated, respectful tones. "Ambassador, does this mean the Forever Hunt has concluded?" Chen Okafor's smile was gentle, but carried depths that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. The accounting for Kepler 438b, New Terra, Haven's Rest, and Demeter's Garden is complete, yes. But the forever hunt doesn't end, Queen Mind. It simply waits. Humanity now has settlements on 247 worlds, with a population approaching 50 billion souls. We've integrated into galactic society completely. We're your neighbors, your colleagues, your friends, sometimes even your family. She gestured to the memorial wall that dominated one side of the chamber, names etched in materials from every known civilization. But we're also the species that prove that forever is not just a word. We're the ones who will spend generations tracking down anyone who harms our innocent, no matter where they hide, no matter how long it takes. The forever hunt isn't a military campaign or a government policy. It's who we are. 100 years after the warning, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The concept of casual violence against civilian populations had become virtually unthinkable, not because of treaties or laws, but because everyone understood the inevitable consequence. Humans would come for you. Maybe not today, maybe not in your lifetime, but they would come. The Humanity Remembers Foundation had evolved into something unprecedented, a multi-species organization dedicated to ensuring that the innocent victims of violence throughout the galaxy would never be forgotten. Humans had taught the galaxy's other species something profound, that remembrance itself could be a form of justice, and that the persistent pursuit of accountability could reshape civilizations. Children throughout the galaxy now learned about the forever hunt in their history classes, not as a cautionary tale about human vengeance, but as an example of how a single species had transformed the concept of justice from something immediate and limited into something eternal and universal. The hunt had become a guarantor of peace, a living reminder that actions have consequences that echo across generations. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, human settlements continued their patient work, remembering the dead, teaching their children, and ensuring that the galaxy would never again dismiss a warning delivered by someone who had nothing left to lose but their promise to never forget. The laughter in the council chamber had stopped forever.